Charles Kuralt had a knack for reminding America of its human side. The CBS newsman died Friday in New York, but left his road trip tales as a legacy.
America's most trusted storyteller lived a double life that not even his closest colleagues suspected. To millions of viewers, Charles Kuralt was the calm voice who reminded America of its heart and soul, traveling dusty backroads and shining a spotlight on ordinary people who seemed extraordinary through his lens. But behind that worn smile was a secret that, if it had come out during his lifetime, would have destroyed his carefully built reputation. For 29 years, he sent hundreds of thousands of dollars to another woman while his wife waited at home in New York. He built a second life in the wide-open spaces of Montana, complete with land, cabins, and children who called him Pop, children who weren't his own. The story remained hidden until the very end, when a single letter revealed a shocking truth and forced the world to see Charles Kuralt in an entirely different light. For decades, Charles Kuralt seemed like the last man who could possibly be hiding anything. His voice carried the kind of trust that viewers once reserved for figures like Walter Cronkite or Edward R. Murrow. While other reporters chased breaking stories with urgency, Kuralt slowed down, telling gentle tales about small towns, school teachers, and craftsmen who lived far from the headlines. He didn't come across as flashy or ambitious. He came across as genuine. People believed him, not just because of what he said, but because of how he said it. That down-home, neighborly presence made him one of the most beloved figures in American media. Yet what few realized was that the same qualities that made him so believable, his calmness, his warmth, his gift for silence, also made it easier for him to maintain a secret. Behind the mask of America's storyteller was a man quietly dividing his time, slipping between two families who never knew about each other. And when the truth finally came out, the very image that made him famous became part of his downfall. Kuralt's ability to find beauty in the ordinary didn't come from nowhere. It was born on a North Carolina tobacco farm, where his childhood was marked by simplicity, hardship, and imagination. There was no electricity, no running water, and no comforts of modern life. Instead of complaining, young Charles turned these limits into inspiration. He made newspaper kites, flying headlines so high into the sky, he joked that God himself could read them. He carved slingshots, tickled Venus flytraps, and found joy in the smallest things around him. As his family moved from town to town, he absorbed every new environment, from the rhythms of farm life to the pulse of growing southern cities. At just 14, he was already on the radio announcing baseball games, his smooth delivery turning minor league matchups into something special. That same year, he won a national contest that took him all the way to Washington, D.C., where he shook hands with President Truman. Before high school had even ended, the world could see that Kuralt had a rare gift, the ability to tell a story so well that people stopped and listened. These early experiences would shape his lifelong approach, making the ordinary feel extraordinary. When Kuralt arrived at the University of North Carolina, he was already a local legend. But what happened there pushed him from promising student to national talent. He became editor of the student paper, where he showed he wasn't afraid to challenge authority. His editorials against segregation and strict school policies earned him both enemies and admirers. Some called him radical, others simply called him bold. While many of his peers focused only on studies, Kuralt was juggling radio jobs, writing scripts, and producing documentaries, often completing a broadcast before rushing into an exam. His talent didn't go unnoticed. At just 23, CBS News hired him, the youngest correspondent in its history. Almost overnight, he went from covering college sports to covering world-shaking events. He was present during The historic Kennedy-Nixon debates, an audience of over 70 million watching him, helped shape television's future. Soon, he was stationed in Latin America, navigating revolutions and riots with a calm voice that reassured viewers. In Vietnam, he came under fire alongside soldiers, narrowly escaping death during an ambush. In Selma, Alabama, his gentle interviews gave voice to the civil rights struggle. These moments made his reputation. Kuralt wasn't just a reporter. He was someone Americans leaned on to explain a chaotic world. Despite his success, Kuralt grew restless. He didn't want to compete for breaking stories anymore. He wanted something different. In 1967, he proposed an idea that sounded almost ridiculous. What if I just traveled the country with no assignments, no deadlines, just to see what I can see? Against all odds, CBS approved it, and On the Road was born. Armed with a beat-up motorhome, a cameraman, and a map, Kuralt crisscrossed America's backroads, looking for stories no one else cared about. What he found captivated the nation. A 99-year-old bricklayer still working, a man building a house from beer bottles, a teacher who had taught generations in the same one-room schoolhouse. While other reporters delivered grim headlines, Kuralt showed kindness, humor, and resilience. Viewers saw themselves in the people he profiled, and the show quickly became one of the most beloved segments on television. Over the next 25 years, he traveled more than 1 million miles, winning Emmys and Peabodys along the way. Time magazine even called his segments 2-minute ceasefires during years when America was torn apart by war and division. On the Road wasn't just television. It was comfort, hope, and a reminder that the real heart of America lived in quiet places most people never saw. By the 1970s, Kuralt was at the height of his career. He hosted Sunday Morning, brought in millions of viewers, and became a household name. To the public, he was the very definition of wholesome, a man who celebrated ordinary Americans while living an ordinary marriage in New York. His wife, Susanna P.D. Baird, was a respected lawyer who supported his demanding schedule, believing his long absences were simply part of the job. But while CBS presented Kuralt as America's friendly neighbor, behind the scenes, he was carefully constructing a second life. In Reno, Nevada, he met Patricia Shannon, a divorced mother of 3. What began as dinners and roses quickly escalated into something permanent. He helped her through a divorce, paid for her children's schooling, and set her up in new homes across the country. While his legal wife managed society events in Manhattan, Kuralt was quietly sending money to another woman and becoming a father figure to her children. His life was split in two, one for the cameras, one hidden in shadows. And for nearly 3 decades, nobody knew. If Charles Kuralt's secret had a center, it wasn't in New York where his wife waited or in Reno where Patricia Shannon once lived. It was in Montana, a place Kuralt described as heaven on earth, but one that held a truth he never shared with the world. In 1970, at the very height of his career, Kuralt bought 20 acres of land near the Big Hole River, deep in the quiet, rugged beauty of Montana's countryside. To his wife Susanna, he explained the purchase as nothing more than a fishing retreat, a peaceful escape from the pressures of New York and CBS. That story sounded believable. After all, Kuralt loved nature, solitude, and fly fishing. But in reality, this land was much more than a retreat. It was the cornerstone of the secret life he had carefully built with Patricia Shannon. Over time, those 20 acres grew into 90 as Kuralt kept adding more parcels of land. He restored an old one-room schoolhouse, built cabins, and carved out trails. It wasn't just a vacation spot. It was a second home. Every September, he disappeared from his official life, leaving behind CBS studios and bustling New York streets to spend weeks in Montana with Patricia. Here, he wasn't the polished broadcaster or the husband returning late from work trips. Here, he was simply Charlie, a man who chopped wood, grilled fish by the river, and tucked Patricia's kids into bed. The relationship between Kuralt and Patricia wasn't a casual fling. It was a partnership that lasted nearly 3 decades. Her children grew up calling him Pop. He sent them money for school, bought them baseball gloves, and even taught her son to drive. He celebrated birthdays, holidays, and milestones, not with his own legal family, but with Patricia's. To anyone watching from the outside, he looked like a doting stepfather, devoted and generous. But behind closed doors, this devotion came at an astonishing cost. Kuralt funneled enormous amounts of money into his Montana secret. By the time of his death, he had spent more than $600,000 on Patricia, equivalent to millions today. He purchased multiple homes for her, including a $50,000 cottage in Ireland where they could escape together without the risk of being seen in America. He gave her steady cash payments, covered tuition, bought cars, and even arranged financial investments in her name. At times, he disguised these transactions as sales of his Montana property, though they were really gifts to ensure Patricia's comfort and security. The more his public career soared, the more elaborate his Montana retreat became. When he won Peabody Awards and Emmys for On the Road, he quietly celebrated not in New York, but in Montana with Patricia. When he became the host of Sunday Morning and reached millions of viewers, he privately looked forward to stepping away from the spotlight and driving through Big Sky country to the woman and family the world didn't know about. The duality was staggering. America saw a man who praised honesty and simple living, while behind the curtain, he was managing a deception that grew larger every year. What makes Montana such a fascinating part of Kuralt's story is how symbolic it became. To the outside world, Montana represented freedom, nature, and renewal. To Kuralt, it was also the only place where his 2 lives collided, his public image providing the income, his secret life consuming it. Every log cabin he built, every acre he purchased, was proof of how far he was willing to go to keep Patricia close. He had essentially created a parallel universe, one where he wasn't a CBS newsman or a husband in New York, but a different man entirely. And yet, Montana was also his greatest mistake, because it was here, on this land he cherished so deeply, that his secret finally unraveled. Just 16 days before his death, Kuralt signed the infamous letter handing the Montana property to Patricia, a letter that would expose everything. The very land that gave him escape, peace, and love, ultimately revealed the double life he had spent nearly 30 years hiding. In 1997, Kuralt, health collapsed. Lupus left him bedridden in a New York hospital, barely able to move. Just 16 days before he died, he wrote Patricia Shannon a letter that would change everything, a note instructing her to inherit the Montana property. He had already slipped her $80,000 to buy some of the land under the guise of a sale, but now he made his wishes unmistakable. When Kuralt died on July 4, 1997, Patricia arrived at the funeral holding the letter. His wife, Petey, who had been married to him for 35 years, had no idea. She learned at the same moment as the world that her husband had a secret family, hidden properties, and had spent decades financing another woman's life. The revelation set off a bitter court battle. The Montana land, valued at over $600,000, became the focus of lawsuits between Shannon and Kuralt's daughters. In 2000, the Montana Supreme Court ruled in Shannon's favor, confirming Kuralt's letter as binding. The result left his legal family stunned, financially cut out, and forced to grapple with the truth that the man they thought they knew had lived a double existence all along. After his death, Patricia Shannon published a memoir titled Charles and Me. She laid everything bare: the love letters, the late-night calls, the Christmas poems, and the trips where Kuralt introduced her son as his own. She described how he split his time between two families, managing the deception so smoothly that neither side questioned it until the very end. For the public, it was a revelation that felt like betrayal. The man who had spent decades celebrating truth, honesty, and the everyday American spirit had been hiding a lie bigger than any story he ever told. Today, Kuralt's legacy is complicated. On one hand, his On the Road series remains one of the most touching and human contributions to American television, a collection of stories that celebrated kindness and resilience. On the other hand, the revelations about his secret life force viewers to ask uncomfortable questions. How well do we really know the people we trust on our screens? Can someone be both a gifted, compassionate storyteller and a master of deception? Charles Kuralt's life doesn't offer easy answers. Instead, it leaves us with a haunting reminder that sometimes the stories we tell the world are nothing compared to the ones we keep hidden.